What is good, everybody? Welcome to the Bully Ball Podcast on the Gold Standard Podcast Network. I'm Rob Stats Guerrera, pinch hitting for Jason Aponte. And as always on a Tuesday, Steph Sanchez is here. Hi, Steph.
Hello, Rob. Nice to see you again.
No, stop lying. You're mad. You're mad because Jason was a late scratch.
No, I'm like, this could make for some good entertainment because we're probably going to argue at some point.
Yes, we are. Although on the main point of today's show, the Nick Bosa situation, I don't think we disagree, frankly, because this should have been done by now, Steph, and it's not. And tomorrow is the biggest practice of the week for the 49ers, and Nick Bosa is nowhere to be found.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely concerning. I mean, I think we're at the point where you're probably just assuming he's not going to suit up. And, if I'm Nick Bosa and the 49ers are not meeting my price, I totally understand that from his point of view. I am always like pro player when it comes to getting these contracts. These teams in the NFL are making money hands over fist, and they want to get cheap when it comes to making some of these extensions. Nick Bosa is maybe the best at his position, and certainly the best the 49ers have seen in, maybe a decade or more, right? So I think the 49ers just need to come away with the money, especially if they want to win games. Like, they can't afford to lose any games, right? We talk about this. They have talked about this. They're in a win now mode, win now window, right? And if you have aspirations of being a Super Bowl winning team, you have to have Nick Bosa out there. I've seen a lot of people, debate whether the 49ers are a Super Bowl team without Nick Bosa, and I don't think they are. In the last two regular seasons, Bosa was responsible for 165 pressures, 35 sacks. The rest of San Francisco's entire defensive end group, Clinton Farrell, Austin Bryant, Drake Jackson, Kerry Hyder, since 2021, they have combined for 117 pressures and 18 sacks. The drop-off from Bosa and everyone else on this team is just so stark that I don't see how the 49ers can get a win without him. And that's why I think the 49ers just need to get this done ASAP. It should have been done a long time ago.
Zach Greer, I'll help pitch in $20 for Nick Bosa to get signed. Well, that probably bridges the gap. So
hey, that'll get it done. But I was joking that Jed York was just trying to get some more money for Bosa's extension when he got into all his trouble.
Boy. Maybe they can't get the final approval from Jed because he's dealing with lawsuits. And then we get this, Steph, from Schlemiel. How many sacks did Bosa have in the playoffs last year? Dude, first of all, if you just look at sacks and you think that's the measure of an edge rusher, you're not seeing the full picture. Second of all, Bosa has more playoff sacks than career playoff games played. So are we we're banging on Nick Bosa now? That's where we are. Bosa's not that good. This is the stage we're at now, Steph.
We found John Lynch's burner. No, but I can rattle off more stats if we want in favor of Nick Bosa and why he's so important for this team. In 2020, when Bosa tore his ACL, the 49ers were, I believe, 17th in points allowed. Al Sacco tweeted this: since 2019, San Francisco's defense has a 48% pass rush win rate with Bosa on the field. It drops to 11% without him on the field. To my point, Bosa being out there and him not being out, it's just such a stark difference that you can't afford to go into the regular season with this. It's terrible. The 49ers are 5-10 without Nick Bosa. They need him more than he needs them.
Yes, I completely agree with you, and I think he knows that. Sign me too, watching on my Twitch page. Shout out to the Twitch audience at Stats on Fire. Please follow me. How many other people won Defensive Player of the Year last year? Ted Talks Ball says he's great against the run too. And Nick Eller points out that Bosa had the game-altering fumble recovery in the Seattle game. Yes, he did, and the Seahawks were driving down the field in the third quarter, about to tie the game, and Charles Omenihu gets the strip, and Bosa falls on it, completely changed the tenor of that game. The Niners ended up blowing the doors off of them for that.
He's also the reason the 49ers did not lose against the Raiders last season.
Yeah.
Don't forget that game and that play.
And I like this from David. Bosa gives his teammates chances to eat if he's not indulging himself. Exactly. He draws double teams, especially like what they could have, Steph, with Armstead and Hargrave in the middle and Bosa on the edge. Like, that is devastating potentially. You want that there. Their whole defense is built around that, getting that consistent pressure. That's going to make life easier for Drake Jackson also on the other side. Like, the impact cannot be overstated. So I don't want to hear that like Nick Bosa is not worth it. He is worth it. And one last thing, it's not your money. What are you worried about? It's not your money. Pay the man.
And like I said, the 49ers have the money, all right? It's just a matter of them, digging their heels and saying, no, that's too high, and hoping that at some point Nick Bosa and his camp are going to cave and compromise and say, okay, fine, we'll meet you at your price. But there's no reason from a negotiating standpoint, from a business standpoint, for Bosa to agree to whatever the 49ers are giving him right now if it isn't what he wants. I mean, he has all the leverage, in my opinion, in this case. And quite honestly, if the 49ers lose on Sunday without him, I might ask for a little bit more if I'm Nick Bosa.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and that again is the danger of, letting this go into the regular season, because with more weeks that go on, if you drop some games without Bosa has even more leverage than he had before. So this is a tricky and risky game that the 49ers are playing.
Salty Cyclist says, just not worth the money for replaceable positions. Niners love paying easily replaceable position groups lots of money and ignore the most important offensive line and quarterback. It's an interesting point, Steph. I mean, they ponied up for a tight end. They ponied up for a linebacker. And then get to the most valuable or second most valuable, depending on what your argument is, defensive player that they have. And all of a sudden, they don't want to pay him what he's worth. And I get it. Like, they have a contract offer, right? That is going to make him the highest paid edge rusher. Well, that's not going to do it. They got to go beyond that. And I don't know if they're willing to. You saw this Diana Rossini tweet before we pushed record. She said, we have football this week and there are 4 contract extensions on the table for players that are generational talents. Burrow, Bosa, Chris Jones, and Justin Jefferson. These are future Hall of Famers that could respectively sign record deals. What do you think about that? Where do you think that news is coming from?
Well, we were talking about this right before we went live, and we're like, there's starting to become more reports, and you can tell which one is coming from either side. Both sides, John Lynch said that both sides were not going to talk about this deal in public. Well, that just meant they are not going to say anything, but indirectly they're giving or feeding this information to some of the national media who are now putting this stuff out. I remember last week, Ian Rappaport mentioned the 49ers have a substantial deal on the table. Today, Diana Rossini saying this, that there's, record deal on the table for Nick Bosa. And what does that do? Well, it creates, fans going against the player a little bit. And I think that's just part of maybe what the 49ers want to do there, or just to deflect the blame onto the player and not them, because, hey, we made the deal, people. We have this great offer on the table. He's not taking it. It's all his fault. It's not our fault. So they know they're getting a lot of heat about this contract right now. And so that's their way of, I think, deflecting. But I don't think Nick Bosa and his camp are going to flinch at this. I don't think they care if they're being called greedy by, random Twitter users or X users, whatever you want to call them. That's not going to do it. That's not going to move the needle for them. So I think at the end of the day, they're just going to have to see the money. Show me the money.
I think that's the only way out of it. Schlemiel's back. I don't want the Niners to blow up the team for one player. The hard cap is a real thing. Here's the thing. You don't have this guy. You have blown up the team. You have blown up your chances to win a Super Bowl. There is no way they win a Super Bowl without Nick Bosa. There's just not. Like, what are you worried about? Ayuk? Ayuk is a wide receiver. Okay, go look at the past drafts of wide receivers. You can replace those guys. The guys you can't replace are the freak edge rushers. Kyle Shanahan said it himself. He's like, I can get wide receivers open. I can't fake it with a pass rusher. You either have it or you don't. And clearly Bosa has it. Obviously, the reigning defensive player of the year. So the idea that, you have this sacred roster that you can't ever mess with, so you can't sign Nick Bosa, I just don't think is accurate.
And this is the price you pay for drafting really good talent. And yeah, the 49ers have missed on other players, and maybe you guys should be thankful for that, because otherwise they'd have to pay way more people. But Nick Bosa is one of those guys that, they invested a first round pick in. He has lived up to everything, I think, to this point that the 49ers thought he would be, maybe even more. And you have to pay for that. You have to pay for that. So I don't even know what to say. I mean, I think Nick Bosa, like I said, is well within his rights to be asking for what he's asking for. And the 49ers just are going to have to accept that at some point, and ideally before it's too late.
This is my question, right? Like, does Jed York care that Bosa's holding out? Because if he does, like, he could pick up the phone and be like, hey, just pay him. I give you permission to sign him to the contract, like whatever it's going to take to get it done. He could easily
Kyle
make that.
could do that too, I'm sure.
So, like, what's going on here? Like, I can't believe that when Kyle like calls John into his office and is like, give me the update. And John's like, well, he's asking for this. Kyle's sitting there going, no, don't give it to him. Like, I think that's really, really weird. By now, both sides clearly have to know what the other one wants. I'm sure both sides know what it would take to get a deal done. And yet neither side is agreeing to it. And so, like, the Niners are saying they're okay with this, essentially. And that's stunning to me.
For the people who say the 49ers can't pay everyone, it's absolutely true. I mean, a lot of really good teams at some point reach this, fork in the road where they have to make some really tough decisions. Wouldn't you want Nick Bosa on the team more so than some of the other guys who have maybe been extended already and have enjoyed their extension with this team for some years now? I'm thinking George Kittle. I'm thinking Kyle Juszczyk, guys who have outs in their contract built in for 2024. This is what the 49ers plan for when they create these contracts, and they have outs built into them because they know, hey, we're going to have to pay some other guys somewhere down the line. So let's make sure that we have outs in these contracts. Also, the way that they construct these contracts, they get pretty creative, and it has to do with how much money they're allocating to other areas. Looking at Nick Bosa and looking at the 49ers cap situation, the first 2 years of this deal are going to be pretty low cap hits for the team. And that is because they can't pay everyone. They have to have everyone fit in under the cap, at least for a couple years, right? So then you make those decisions once you cross that bridge. But I think they could absolutely make this work. And in turn, some other guys may have to be let go. I'm okay with that. That's how good I think Nick Bosa is. It is so hard to find an franchise, pass rusher in the league, maybe up there with finding a franchise quarterback. And while Brock Purdy is on a rookie deal, hey, you got to take advantage of that, right? And pay Nick Bosa his money. So I think I would rather see the 49ers pay Nick Bosa and let go of some other guys that could be maybe easily I don't want to say easily, but replaceable. 49ers drafted 2 tight ends this year. That's not to back up George Kittle. Sorry, it's just not. I think the eventual goal.
Who has no guaranteed money left in his deal next year? Oh, that's right. George Kittle. No guaranteed money left in the deal. Like, they can get out of it if they want to get out of it. Sorry to cut you off there. And like, when you're talking about choosing between these players, you're not talking about for this year. They can sign Bosa and have everybody for this year. Yes, you will eventually have to make decisions down the line, but this is an easy one. Okay. Yes, you can't pay everybody. This is one of the guys you pay. Period. End of story. Like, he's not one of the guys you let go. Brandon Ayuk is one of those guys. Juice, like you said. Kittle, if you have to. Nick Bosa is not one of these guys. And I'm amazed that there are some people willing to just throw it away. This is a tweet that I got. I want to throw it up here from Johnny Cristo.
Zoom in.
Why you always got to be calling me out on my Zoom?
Yes, we can't see it, Rob.
You can't. Can you see it now?
Zoom it in, Rob. Zoom it in.
All right. Bosa is not worth $35 million per year. He's just not. Neither is Aaron Donald. That price point is for quarterbacks only. If you don't have a quarterback worth that number, it's unwise to spend it elsewhere on a single player. People got to get past this, okay? Salaries go up every year. Somebody's going to make more than Aaron Donald. Guess what? That's just how it works. Jimmy Garoppolo was the highest paid player in the history of the NFL at one point. Salaries go up. So this idea that like you can't go past Aaron Donald or nobody's worth $35 million a year. Daniel Jones is getting $40 million a year. Oh, like, so what are we doing here? Get this, like this number out of your head. You have to get past that because that's not how Bosa's thinking.
Okay, I see some of the comments saying, "Oh, like we shouldn't get rid of George Kittle. That's a bad idea." Oh, Ayuk after the season he just had.
It wasn't that
Like,
great.
can't you apply that same logic to Nick Bosa? Are you just gonna let like Nick Bosa go? Like he's better than both of those players. Like respectfully, like he just is. So I don't know. Like I said, we've already enjoyed George Kittle for as many years as we have, especially also in his within his contract extension. We've gotten a few years out of that. So George Kittle turns 30 in October, 1 month away. He's dealt with injuries. I know he is hard to replace, like, but as a team, like you have to look at these things and you have to make tough decisions. It's just going to happen at some point. So you gotta weigh your options. And if I'm the 49ers, I'm looking at Kittle and I know he's a fan favorite. That's probably really hard to move on from. Bill Walsh always moved on from guys before they really hit their low point, I guess you could say. Like he moved on from players while they were still somewhat at their peak. And the reason for that is just because you have to make way for other guys to, make the team and extend those guys too. But I mean, I guess a little bit different from that era, but there wasn't really a cap then. But still, you get my point. I mean, you have to know when to move on from guys. And I think it is a tough decision, but the 49ers are going to have to make those at some point. And I would rather them keep Nick Bosa than some other players.
Shaq Chan, I love that handle. Watching on my Twitch page, really, Ayuk after the season he just had, he had 1,015 yards and 8 touchdowns. Like it wasn't that good. You can easily replace that. Even George Kittle, like, yeah, George Kittle had the one monster year in 2018, right, where he had 1,300 yards. That's awesome. The rest of it, like, you can replace that. Compare the Super Bowl team in 2019 to the teams that we have now, right? We didn't have Brandon Ayuk. You know what we did? We had Emmanuel Sanders. We didn't have Trent Williams, but you know who we did? We had Joe Staley. We didn't have Christian McCaffrey, but we had Raheem Mostert. Like, you can replace different guys and still have a really good team. You cannot get attached to everybody because of the hard salary cap. Bosa is one of the guys you do get attached to because you cannot replace them easily. You just can't do it. Tight ends, wide receivers, plug and play. You can find guys. Edge rushers that are as good, that are defensive player of the year good, like Nick Bosa, you can't replace them. And I'm stunned that there are so many people willing to walk away from him.
Yeah. And, I've seen people mentioning other names, maybe not Kittle, maybe it's Eric Armstead. Yeah. I mean, the point stands. There's many players that the 49ers could see moving on from just because of this Nick Bosa deal. Eric Armstead definitely in that territory as well. His cap number, shot up quite a bit this year and also next year. So, yeah, I mean, this is why they kind of stagger the extensions like they do and the contract.
Yes.
Like the numbers, escalate with each year or after a couple years because so they can fit everyone into the cap. But that doesn't mean you were able to keep everyone. I mean, the 49ers had to, let Jimmy Ward walk this offseason. And, that hurts too. But those are just the decisions that you have to make because, again, you can't keep everyone, right? So, yeah, it just comes with the territory. You draft a really good team, you're going to have to pay the guys that you want to keep. It's a luxury, and there's some downsides to it too when you have to make the tough decisions. You just have to be smart as to who you keep around.
Rorschach says, I'm stunned you think everybody is so easily replaceable. They're more easily replaceable than Nick freaking Bosa, and that's the point. Those are the decisions you have to make, right? If we've got to let somebody walk, which clearly you're going to have to, because like you said, you can't sign everybody. Who is easier to replace? Nick Bosa, wide receiver that's had only 1,000-yard season in his entire career. Probably Nick Bosa. Nick Bosa or older tight end that's constantly hurt and really only had 2 good seasons in his career. Nick Bosa. Like, these decisions are not difficult. It is fascinating to me how fast teams or fans, I should say, can turn on a guy, no matter how good they are. No matter how good they are, there's always fans that are going to say, he's not worth it. Get rid of him. And we're here with Nick Bosa. It's crazy.
Well, let's turn our attention now to like the game on Sunday. I mean, this has clouded so much of what we've been talking about these last few weeks and these last few days that I almost forget there's a game on Sunday. And again, that game most likely going to be played without Nick Bosa. And I feel for Steve Wilkes a little bit because, new defensive coordinator. He hasn't had Nick Bosa this entire offseason. He's been working a lot with the secondary. I do expect the secondary to be a little bit better than last year, but week one, maybe that might not all materialize on the very first week, right? Sometimes takes defenses some time to get going. I kind of wonder, Steve Wilkes has always had a pretty high, blitz rate in his past defenses. With Nick Bosa out, do we see some more creativity? Do we see more blitzes trying to get some pressure on Kenny Pickett?
I think you're going to see more blitzes, even if Bosa was there. I just kind of think that's how Steve Wilkes rolls. I think you're going to see Warner blitz a lot more because that's something that Wilkes did with the Carolina Panthers. As soon as he got in there, he started blitzing Brian Burns like crazy, which Burns loved, and I don't blame him. So I think you were going to see that anyway. And yeah, I think he's going to have to do that now just to generate any kind of pass rush, unfortunately, because I mean, look at the names. Yes, you've got Javon Hargrave. Eric Armstead didn't have a single sack in the regular season last year. And I know he was banged up. Drake Jackson is what we're hoping that he makes a leap, but right now, you can't count on him. So I think if you're going to get pressure, you're going to have to blitz. And that's a little scary because Steelers have really good wide receivers.
I feel like this game is going to be very uncomfortable to watch because I think the defense is not going to be what we're used to in this one. Like, I just have that feeling. And again, it's because like Nick Bosa not being there, and I don't want to go down that rabbit hole again because we just talked about him for 20 minutes, but him not being there, the makeup of this defense is going to look quite different. So let's just prepare ourselves. All right. Like I'm just preparing myself to see, a lot of completions that maybe wouldn't have happened otherwise, or just, maybe the Steelers are able to, dink and dunk and move the ball down the field. And I don't know. I'm just expecting to see a different kind of defense. I'm expecting to be uncomfortable while watching the game. The 49ers, the offense at least will have to put points on the board. That's not such an easy task either when you have another great pass rusher on the other side and TJ Watt who will line up against Colton McKivitz, the new starter on the offensive line. Look, I'm not really worried about the offensive line because it's mostly returning starters, and they fared pretty well last year, better than we all expected. But Colton McKivitz, I think it's fair to wonder how he'll do against someone as good as TJ Watt. I mean, I think even for good offensive linemen, you might struggle against a TJ Watt, right? So I'm a little nervous about that and what that might look like. I'm sure Kyle Shanahan will probably help out on that side or wherever TJ's lining up. But that's a matchup I think I'm really concerned about. And they got Nick Herbig too, who I'm not sure if he's going to start, but he has looked good in the preseason. He was a rookie who they drafted, and I don't know who let the Steelers get him, but just another guy on the defensive line that is dangerous.
It just seems like it's more pressure and responsibility that we are heaping on the shoulders of a 23-year-old quarterback with 8 games of experience, right? Hey, Brock, you need to pilot this team to the Super Bowl. And in week 1, you're going to face a great pass rushing team on the road. You're not going to have your best pass rusher. I don't know if Kittle's even going to play. We don't know that right now. He was working on the side yesterday, and it's like, oh, by the way, the defense might not be as good, so we might need you to score 25 to 30 points every single week. He can do it. Look, we saw the offense humming last year, but it's a lot of pressure to ask on Brock Purdy right out of the gate.
I mean, yes, it is. I don't know if Brock Purdy's the kind of guy that necessarily feels that pressure. I mean, I hope not. Based on what we saw last year, I think there was a different type of pressure for him last year. And you can say, yeah, I mean, he was the last pick in the draft, so there wasn't really a lot of expectations for him. But as soon as he started winning, and as soon as he started looking the way he did, I think there was a lot of pressure on him to continue that. And he showed up in every game after that. So I think he's already dealt with pressure, and I think he's handled it pretty well. It is a different type of pressure this year, but I think he can handle it. Like, to me, he doesn't seem like the guy that gets like mentally rattled, and I think that's a really good quality for a quarterback to have, especially on this team. So I'm not too worried about that, but everything else does have to be on point if you're not going to have the same, pass rushing that you're accustomed to on this team. Everything else will need to be perfect. The margin for error, it has narrowed significantly without Nick Bosa.
Absolutely. And Robert Tuncap says Brock was scrambling a lot and making plays. That is the one thing I'm interested to see in this game, because clearly the Steelers are going to be able to get pressure, whether it's TJ Watt or Highsmith or anybody that they have. They're going to get pressure. How does Brock handle it? How does he respond? Does he use his legs more to scramble? Can he extend plays? Because that's going to be a huge factor for the 49ers. It's something that they have not had with Jimmy Garoppolo. Even Trey Lance didn't extend plays the way that Brock Purdy can. It could come in really handy really quickly right out of the gate.
Yeah, it could. I think the one thing that Purdy should be careful about, though, is not showing that trend. He always rushed to his left,
Mm-hmm.
and defenses probably know that already. And so as soon as he does that, there's going to be a quick adjustment to stop those. So I think if Brock Purdy's going to escape the pocket, I would like to see him, switch it up a little bit, maybe go to the right side, maybe go up the middle if there's a rushing lane for him. Just not really show those trends, because I think that could be dangerous as well. Guy coming off his injury, right? You don't want to take more hits, to that arm or anywhere else. He dealt with the ribs last year as well. So definitely just want to make sure that he stays safe as well and is smart with the football and where he goes with it. So yeah, he can make guys miss with his legs. And that is a really great quality to have. Just don't overdo it. And I'm sure that's something, the 49ers, Kyle Shanahan has probably mentioned to him as well.
About 1,000 times. Yeah. Are you worried about the Steelers being able to run the ball against the 49ers? Kyle Shanahan was very direct when he asked about the run defense in the preseason, and he was like, yep, it stinks. Now, the first team not out there, all those caveats, but I'm a little worried about the run defense.
I think most of what we saw was, of course, in the preseason, there isn't a lot of game planning involved with that. There's no game planning, actually. And most of the time, it's your second unit out there. So I'll give them a pass, but obviously, kind of what Kyle said, you can't just ignore it. I mean, it is kind of concerning. You can't just assume that you're going to be able to stop the run out there after what they showed in the preseason. So I think I almost felt like it was putting Steve Wilkes on notice a bit. Like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
your run defense did not look good. Clean that up before week 1, please. I mean, and Javon Hargrave being in there is certainly going to help. And that's my point, right? Like, he wasn't out there much in the preseason. So of course, yeah, they'll might allow some runs. But still, I think there were some things as far as just like gap integrity and things like that, allowing rushing lanes that you don't want to allow in the regular season. So there is some concern for me, especially because I feel like this is going to be an imbalanced game for the defense. So that could make way for them allowing more runs. because I think the Steelers are also going to be able to get some passes complete. Like it's going to be a more balanced, I think, offense for the Steelers because Nick Bosa isn't there, and it's just like part of the trickle down effect. So yeah, I am concerned, and that's why I'm ready to feel uncomfortable watching this defense play. I am.
That old feeling when you're sitting watching the 49ers and you just don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I feel good when Brock Purdy drops back to pass, but I think this is probably the most concerned I've been about the defense when you combine the Bosa thing with the fact that I don't know what the defensive line, I don't know how consistent they're going to be able to play outside of Bosa. The secondary could be good, but it might not also. Hufanga's already banged up a little bit. He's got that weird Baker cyst thing. Tashawn Gibson's been hurt, but he says he's going to play. I don't know. I got Ajita for this one, big time.
Yeah, I mean, and I know people are talking about the run defense. Hargrave isn't a run defender. I mean, he's just a big guy, so like the point of him is just clogging up the middle. He's definitely better than Kinlaw. I can tell you that, and that's one of the big reasons why they brought him in. But Rob, to your point, and Bosa not being out there, I just want to point out and remind everyone. I think we were all worried about the edge position, even if Nick Bosa was going to be there, because they let go of Ebukam this past off season, and now they brought in Clinton Farrell and Drake Jackson. There's a lot of pressure on him too to take that next step. Now both of those guys are going to be starting together, and so yeah, I think that's the concern too, because we were already worried about the edge and the edge depth on this defensive line, maybe taking a step back potentially. I know Hargrave kind of you diminished those worries because you think to yourself, well, Hargrave is such a like they're gonna have to double team him. He's such a force up the middle that'll open things up for the other guys. But if Bosa's not out there, then they don't necessarily have that worry, or opposing offenses won't have that worry. So yeah, I think that's the concern for me. And yeah, I don't know why I think the 49ers should be concerned too. But they seem confident, so I guess good for them.
Yeah, it's look, if I'm the Niners, this is what I try to do. Use McCaffrey. Like the whole offense runs through McCaffrey. Run him. If nothing's open quickly, and Brock is very good at processing things quickly, nothing's open down the field, just chuck it to McCaffrey and let him do his thing. And then when you're on the defensive side of the ball, try and contain the run. I'm not as high on Kenny Pickett. Like I know a lot of hype coming out of Steelers camp is Kenny Pickett's looking good. He's making a jump. Steve Wilkes was talking him up. I talked with Brooke Pryor on ESPN radio. She was saying he looks really good. He doesn't put the fear of God into me. Let's just say that. And I look at the other quarterbacks in the 49ers schedule. Kenny Pickett was on the lower end of guys that keep me up at night. So if they can stop the run and force Kenny Pickett to have to throw, that I think is the best path to victory for the 49ers.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. I do think Kenny Pickett is probably going to look better than he did last year. I mean, second year in the system, generally when quarterbacks do hit a bit of a stride. And you mentioned it before. They do have good wide receivers to lean on. They have Najee Harris to lean on. So yeah, it's a valid, I think, statement to say he doesn't scare you, but I think you can't overlook that either. The 49ers have done that, in the past. What was it? In that Raiders game when they had to play Stidham, and look what he was able to do. So you just never really know. It's also about the game plan and what, Mike Tomlin and their offensive coordinator has planned against the 49ers that maybe could have them moving the ball pretty well. Like you just never know. So yeah, I think on the offensive side, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot of screen passes, although that worries me because, and I haven't seen anyone really mention it, but the screens in the preseason did not look good, like from any of the quarterbacks, really. I didn't think so. I hope that's something that they clean up before week 1, because I think like the screens are going to come in handy to just kind of neutralize the pass rush a little bit. And yeah, CMC definitely going to want to use Debo. I mean, I'm excited. Let's talk about some good things, right? Like, I'm excited to see Debo in what should be better season for him. Like, he just looks way more in shape. It seems like he's way more focused than he was last year. And so I'm excited to see both him and Christian McCaffrey on the field together, because I think they're capable of being just as big of a threat as each other. And so I'm excited to see what they dial up with Debo this year. And Ayuk, I mean, I know you're not as high on Ayuk as I am. I do love Ayuk. I think that there should be better chemistry with Purdy and Ayuk this year, and I would like to see it. Rob, let me ask you this. With George Kittle dealing with his injury still, he's still trying to manage through that. It's an adductor injury that is like the groin area. Um, do you think Kittle plays? I mean, he didn't practice yesterday. Yesterday was a light day for the 49ers. I think he was working off to the side, but I guess
Mhm.
we'll know more maybe tomorrow if he does practice in any capacity.
I don't think he does play, to be honest with you. I think the Niners will be conservative with him because they know that they want him, down the stretch. And if he has to miss this game, I mean, clearly the Niners don't care about big guys missing games, because if they did, Nick Bosa would be signed. And so maybe they look at it like, you know what? I'd rather have you for weeks 2 through 18 or 3 through 18 than to rush you back on the field early in week 1. It's a non-conference game. You know, yes, you want to win all the games because you're trying to get the number 1 seed, but you're not going to go undefeated. If this is one of the games you lose, maybe the 49ers say, we're willing to do it. I don't know. But no, I don't think he plays. I really don't. And I'm amazed that he's banged up again with no contact. Like, this friggin'
Yeah,
preseason.
no, it's concerning for sure. It's not a great way to start the season. It seems like this is how Kittles has started the season the last couple years. Maybe I'm crazy, but I remember last year at least there was a lingering camp injury that kind of spilled into the beginning of last year. It was, uh, when people talk about Kittle's slow start, a lot of people pointed to that being the reason. I think he even talked about it. Man, I don't know if they can afford another season of Kittle like not being 100% or like close to it. I know no one's really 100% once football starts, but I think that's a concern, because again, there's a huge drop off between Kittle and Charlie Warner or Ross Dwelly, especially in the blocking sense as well. So again, with TJ Watt, you're not going to have the help of George Kittle potentially. We're not saying he's for sure going to be out. We really don't know, but if he isn't, it could be trouble.
Absolutely. And we got enough problems. I don't need to add George Kittle on top of it. I did want to get back to one comment, because I said, does Kenny Pickett scare you? And Salty Cyclist said, that's what other teams are saying about
That is
Brock Purdy,
fair. That
which
is
is
fair.
fair. But at least with Brock, I can say, look, I've got a chunk of games where he had this offense scoring 33 points a game. Whether you think it was him, whether you think it was Kyle, he was in the game and those points were on the board. So at least if I'm a 49er fan, I could say, look at this. When has Kenny Pickett ever done that? And so I agree to say that, like, Brock Purdy may not scare people, but he does have a sample of at least some success, however small it may be.
Yeah, I think that's fine to say. I know other teams or other fans like underestimate Brock Purdy, but there's no denying that with him as the starting quarterback, the 49ers offense were rolling. So you can't really ignore that. Yes, Purdy does have limitations. Yes, maybe there is some regression. Maybe there is some adjustments that the defenses make playing against Purdy. We talk about some of the trends. They're going to try to get him avoid him rushing to his left, if he does escape the pocket. So just those little things. There could be some regression, but overall, I think Purdy has the advantage of the pass catchers that he has to work with, right? And so really it's just getting the ball out. And one thing about Brock Purdy is he thinks and reacts very quickly. He's a good processor, and so that gives him a bit of an advantage when he's out there too.
Let me ask you this, because I felt like when Jimmy Garoppolo was the quarterback, teams would make him throw. They would say, we're going to load up the box. Well, I'll never forget seeing like 10 of the 11 defenders in the screen before the snap when watching games on television. Clearly, teams were like, we don't think Jimmy's going to beat us. We're not worried about him throwing deep, and that's how we're going to attack it. With Brock, do you think teams are going to say the same thing? Like, hey, we want to force this guy to beat us? I honestly don't know. I'm not saying one way or another.
I think they'll try because, like, I think historically, you look at this 49ers offense and the weak spot objectively is a quarterback position. I mean, it's probably the worst player on the field given everyone else. Like, that's just how talented the rest of the group is. But that being said, like, I think there's a huge difference between Brock Purdy and Jimmy Garoppolo. And I think it matters in this case because I feel like teams did try to make Brock throw last year and they did all kinds of things. They tried to put more guys in coverage. They've tried to, blitz him. And at least last year, none of that really fazed him much. And he was still able to get the ball quickly. He was able to get it where it needed to go. I think really the only big challenge where he looked somewhat rattled, and even then it was a very, very small sample size was in the Eagles game and part of, the game with the Cowboys. But, I think those are really good defenses. Most teams you're going to face are not at that caliber, at least in the regular season. So I think he'll be okay, I think, for the most part in this game. I'm more worried about the offensive line holding up more than anything.
I think Brock looked a little rattled in the beginning of the Seattle playoff game. The first half, to me, he looked not quite on his game. He looked like he was making some throws that were maybe, but look, 22-year-old guy playing in the playoffs, first time, like, it's understandable. I know he's super poised, but like everybody gets nervous once in a while. So I'm going to cut him some slack. Nick Eller asks, who is the X factor in week 1? Pickens, Ayuk, Hufanga? The one thing about Pickens that makes me nervous is he's incredible at making contested catches. So even if you've got Mooney Ward on him and Mooney's right there, like Pickens can just make a play anyway because he's really, really good. The X factor. Oh, I don't know. For the 49ers, I may go Fred Warner. And my thinking there is just if they're going to get pass rush without Bosa, I think it's going to have to come from him. So maybe I go there.
That's a good one, actually. I might say the same or Hufanga because I think Hufanga could very well be just as involved in blitzes and creating pressure if he hangs around in the box. That does come with some risks too. I mean, you mentioned Pickens just now. They have Deontay Johnson as well. So those are fair concerns for, guys getting open and, they can go deep as well. So I think can't overlook this team. It's week 1. Like I said, the margin for error for this defense, for this offense, very low right now. So they need to make sure everything is clicking going into this game.
Well, let me ask you before we wrap up here. Number 1, do you have a season prediction for the 49ers? And number 2, do you have a prediction for this game?
I wish I would have written it. So I had written it down. I had like an episode where I did the prediction. I want to say like my everything, like my blue skies prediction was like 11 wins, I think. And then, my everything goes wrong prediction was like 10 or 9 wins. And that's still not bad, like at all. So I would say 11. Look, at the beginning, I don't think we expected that the Bosa negotiations, the holdout would go this long. So I thought this would be a win. Tough one, but I thought it'd be a win. With Nick Bosa out, like that puts some doubt in me. And it's in Pittsburgh. This is going to be a tough game. It could be a defensive battle for the offense playing against the Steelers defense. So I'm going to say that the 49ers probably drop this one.
Without Bosa, I'm nervous. I had it as a win, but I was assuming that Bosa was there. Without Bosa, there's a lot of just stuff floating around with this team that I don't love right now. I guess I'll stick with it because that was my prediction, but I would not be shocked at all if the Niners open the season 0-1. Kyle Shanahan falls to 2-5 in week 1 in his career. So frustrating. Anyway, that's going to do it for this edition of the show. Steph, thanks for letting me pinch hit for Jason. Always appreciate it. I don't think we argued too much, which is kind of a change
didn't
for us.
actually. Yeah.
And I'm going to be a guest on your channel as well, right? 49 Carats.
Every Thursday. We still got to nail down a time, so we'll do that. But every Thursday, Rob is going to be joining me on my channel, 49 Carats Podcast. And later today, actually, I have Matt Barrows on the show, so make sure you guys all tune into that.
Boom. Like and subscribe to the 49 Carats YouTube channel and to the Gold Standard YouTube channel. Plenty of Niners love to go around. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, everybody.
Peace.